Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. Before we begin today's victim story, I know it's annoying, but I need to ask for your support by subscribing to the channel here. I'm a new and small channel on YouTube, as you can see, and a simple click on the like button can help me a lot. So please subscribe to support me, click the like button and leave a comment telling me which city you're watching from. Now, let's get to the case. The sun-drenched deck of the research vessel Carcharodon bustled with activity as Dr. Emily Carter stepped aboard, her eyes gleaming with excitement. The salty breeze whipped through her auburn hair, carrying with it the promise of adventure and scientific discovery. At 34, Emily was at the peak of her career as a marine biologist, and this expedition to Guadalupe Island was set to be her crowning achievement. Dr. Carter, welcome aboard, called out Dr. James Reeves, the expedition leader, his weathered face breaking into a warm smile. We've been eagerly awaiting your arrival. Emily returned the smile, hefting her equipment bag higher on her shoulder. Thanks, James. I can hardly believe we're finally here. How are the preparations coming along? As they walked across the deck, James filled her in on the details. We're right on schedule. The team's been setting up the labs and prepping the dive equipment all morning. We've had some exciting sightings already. 2 great whites were spotted near the island just yesterday. Emily's pulse quickened at the news. Great white sharks were the focus of their research, and early sightings boded well for their expedition. That's fantastic. Any idea on size? Reports suggest one was around 15 feet, the other closer to 18. Magnificent creatures, James replied, his voice tinged with reverence. They made their way below deck, where the rest of the research team was bustling about, calibrating instruments and organizing data collection tools. Emily greeted her colleagues with enthusiasm, feeling the collective energy of scientific anticipation in the air. As she began unpacking her gear, a younger researcher named Alex approached her, a tablet in hand. Dr. Carter, I've been reviewing the latest satellite data on water temperatures and prey movements. It looks like we might be in for some extraordinary shark activity this season. Emily leaned in to examine the data, her brow furrowing in concentration. These patterns are fascinating, Alex. Great work on the analysis. If these trends continue, we could be looking at unprecedented numbers of great whites in the area. The day progressed rapidly as final preparations were made. Emily found herself drawn to the dive cage that would be their window into the underwater world of the great white. She ran her hand along the metal bars, feeling a mix of excitement and trepidation. Checking out your new office? A voice called out. Emily turned to see Sarah, the team's dive master, approaching with a clipboard in hand. Just familiarizing myself with it, Emily replied. We'll be spending a lot of time in this cage over the next few weeks. Sarah nodded, her expression serious. Safety first always. I've triple-checked all the equipment, but it never hurts to have another set of eyes. Want to go over the checklist with me? For the next hour, Emily and Sarah meticulously inspected every inch of the cage. As they worked, Emily noticed a slight give in one of the hinges. Sarah, take a look at this. Does this seem loose to you? Sarah examined the hinge, giving it a firm shake. It's got a bit of play, but it's within tolerance. We'll keep an eye on it, but it should hold up fine. These cages are built to withstand a lot of pressure. Emily nodded, pushing down a nagging feeling of unease. You're right. I'm probably just being overly cautious. First dive jitters, I guess, as the sun began to set, casting a golden glow across the Pacific. The team gathered on the deck for a final briefing. James stood before them, his face etched with both excitement and solemnity. Tomorrow we begin our most ambitious study of great white shark behavior to date, he announced. Each of you is here because you're the best in your field. But remember, we're dealing with one of nature's most perfect predators. Respect the sharks, follow protocols, and watch out for each other. Emily, would you like to add anything? Emily stepped forward, feeling the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. James is right. We're on the cusp of groundbreaking research, but safety must always come first. We're here to observe and learn, not to interfere or provoke. Let's make this expedition one for the history books, for all the right reasons. A chorus of agreement rose from the team, followed by animated discussions about the next day's dive schedule. As the meeting broke up, Emily found herself drawn to the ship's railing gazing out at the darkening horizon. The island loomed in the distance, a silent sentinel guarding the secrets of the great whites that patrolled its waters. James joined her, offering a steaming mug of coffee. "Penny for your thoughts?" Emily accepted the mug gratefully, inhaling the rich aroma. "Just thinking about tomorrow. All the years of study, the months of preparation, it all comes down to these next few weeks." James nodded, understanding. "Nervous?" "A little," Emily admitted. "But mostly excited. We have a chance to revolutionize our understanding of great white behavior. Their migration patterns, their social structures, their hunting techniques. There's still so much we don't know. And that's why we're here," James said, his voice filled with quiet determination. "To shine a light on the unknown, to bridge the gap between fear and understanding." They stood in companionable silence for a while, sipping their coffee and listening to the gentle lapping of waves against the hull. As the stars began to emerge in the velvet sky, Emily felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. Later that night, as Emily lay in her bunk, the gentle rocking of the ship lulled her towards sleep. Her mind drifted, filled with images of sleek grey bodies gliding through azure waters. But as she slipped deeper into slumber, the dream shifted. She found herself in the dive cage, surrounded by the endless blue of the ocean. The water was crystal clear, visibility extending for what seemed like miles. Emily marveled at the beauty, feeling perfectly at peace. Suddenly the water darkened. A massive shape emerged from the gloom, growing larger by the second. Emily's heart began to race as she recognized the distinctive profile of a great white shark, larger than any she had ever seen. The shark circled the cage, its black eye fixed on Emily with an intelligence that seemed almost supernatural. She watched, transfixed, as it made another pass, closer this time. Without warning, the cage door swung open. Emily scrambled to close it, but her limbs felt leaden, moving in slow motion. The shark charged, its mouth opening to reveal rows of serrated teeth. Emily jolted awake with a gasp, her heart pounding. She sat up disoriented, before recognizing the familiar surroundings of her cabin. Sweat beaded on her forehead as the remnants of the nightmare faded. "Just a dream," she muttered, reaching for the water bottle beside her bunk. As she sipped the cool liquid, Emily tried to shake off the lingering unease. She was a scientist, after all. She knew better than to let irrational fears cloud her judgment. Still, as she lay back down, Emily couldn't help but think of the slightly loose hinge on the dive cage. "I'll check it again in the morning," she decided, closing her eyes and willing herself back to sleep. The rest of the night passed fitfully, Emily's dreams a kaleidoscope of shimmering scales and shadowy depths. When her alarm chirped at 5 a.m., she was already awake, watching the first grey light of dawn creep through her cabin window. Emily rose, stretching muscles tense from a night of uneasy sleep. She dressed quickly in her wetsuit, the familiar routine, helping to center her thoughts. By the time she stepped out onto the deck, the sky was painting itself in brilliant hues of pink and gold. The ship was already a hive of activity. Crew members checked and double-checked equipment, while her fellow researchers huddled over last-minute data reviews. Emily made her way to the galley, drawn by the aroma of fresh coffee. "Morning, Doc," called out Mike, the ship's cook, as he flipped pancakes on the griddle. "Ready for the big dive?" Emily managed to smile, pouring herself a large mug of coffee. "As ready as I'll ever be, Mike. Those pancakes smell amazing, by the way." "Brain food," Mike winked. "Can't have our star scientist facing the sharks on an empty stomach." Breakfast was a hurried affair, the air thick with anticipation. Emily forced herself to eat, knowing she'd need the energy, but her stomach churned with a mix of excitement and apprehension. As the team made final preparations, Emily found herself drawn once again to the dive cage. She ran her hands over the metal bars, checking each weld and joint with meticulous care. When she reached the hinge that had concerned her the day before, she paused, examining it closely. "Everything okay?" Sarah asked, approaching with the day's dive plan. Emily hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Yeah, just being thorough. This hinge still feels a bit loose, but I guess it's within normal parameters." Sarah double-checked it herself, giving it a firm shake. "Seems secure to me, but we can have the engineer take a look if you're worried." We've got time before the first dive. Emily weighed the options, acutely aware of the ticking clock and the eagerness of the team to get started. No, it's probably fine. Like you said, these cages are built to withstand a lot. Let's stick to the schedule. As the morning sun climbed higher, bathing the deck in warm light, James gathered the team for a final briefing. Emily stood at his side, pushing down the last vestiges of her unease, ready to embark on what promised to be the most extraordinary experience of her career. "All right, team," James began, his voice carrying across the deck. "This is what we've all been working towards. Emily will be leading the first dive with Sarah as her safety diver. Remember your training. Trust your equipment and keep your wits about you. These are wild animals we're dealing with, deserving of our respect and caution." Emily stepped forward, feeling the eyes of her colleagues upon her. "We're about to enter the domain of one of nature's most magnificent and misunderstood creatures. Our work here has the potential to change how the world sees great whites, to replace fear with understanding. Let's make every moment count." A cheer went up from the team, the atmosphere charged with a potent mix of scientific curiosity and primal excitement. As final checks were made and the cage was prepared for lowering, Emily took a deep breath, centering herself. This was it. Years of study, months of preparation, all culminating in this moment. As she approached the cage, Emily felt a sense of destiny, as if her entire career had been leading to this point. She turned back to look at her team, their faces a mix of encouragement and envy. With a final nod to James and Sarah, Emily stepped into the cage, the metal door clanging shut behind her. As the crane whirred to life, beginning to lower the cage into the crystal-clear waters of Guadalupe, Emily's earlier fears melted away, replaced by a sense of profound anticipation. Whatever awaited her in the depths, she was ready to face it, in the name of science and discovery. The cool water began to envelop her, and Emily Carter, marine biologist and shark expert, descended into the blue realm of the great white, unaware that her greatest test, both professional and personal, was about to begin. The cage descended slowly into the azure waters off Guadalupe Island, its metal frame creaking softly as it breached the surface. Inside, Dr. Emily Carter felt her heart racing, a mixture of excitement and trepidation coursing through her veins. The coolness of the Pacific enveloped her, a stark contrast to the warmth of the sun-drenched deck she'd left moments ago. As the cage sank deeper, the world around Emily transformed. The sunlight filtering through the water created ethereal beams, dancing across the submerged volcanic rock formations. Schools of smaller fish darted about, their silver scales glinting as they moved in perfect unison. Emily's breath echoed loudly in her ears, amplified by the regulator. She performed a final check of her equipment, tugging at the straps of her BCD and ensuring her camera was secure. The slight give in the cage's hinge nagged at the back of her mind, but she pushed the thought away, focusing on the task at hand. "Com check, Emily. How are you doing down there?" Sarah's voice crackled through the underwater communication system. Emily gave a thumbs up to the camera mounted on the cage before responding. "All clear, Sarah. Visibility is excellent. No sign of our toothy friends yet, but I can feel the anticipation building." As if on cue, a dark shape materialized in the distance. Emily's breath caught in her throat as she recognized the unmistakable silhouette of a great white shark. Its powerful body moved with effortless grace, propelled by the sweep of its crescent-shaped tail. "Contact 2 o'clock, Emily reported, her voice hushed with awe despite the lack of need for silence. "Adult female, I'd estimate. 16 feet. She's magnificent." The shark circled lazily, its black eye regarding the cage with what Emily could only describe as curiosity. Years of study hadn't prepared her for the visceral impact of being so close to one of nature's most perfect predators. "Got her on camera," James confirmed from the boat above. "Incredible specimen. Any distinctive markings?" Emily studied the shark as it made another pass, closer this time. "Large scar on the left flank, possibly from a boat propeller. And, wait, yes, there's a remora attached near the pectoral fin." She fumbled with her underwater tablet, making rapid notes about the shark's behavior and physical characteristics. The great white continued to circle, each pass bringing it nearer to the cage. Emily, your heart rate's elevated. Sarah's concerned voice came through the comm. Everything okay down there? Taking a deep breath to steady herself, Emily responded, All good, Sarah. Just the adrenaline kicking in. You can't help but feel a little small when you're face to face with a creature like this. As the minutes ticked by, more sharks began to appear. Emily counted 3, then 5, their massive bodies gliding through the water with predatory intent. The original female remained the largest, clearly the dominant presence. James, are you seeing this? Emily asked, her voice tinged with excitement. We've got at least 5 individuals now. This level of social interaction is unprecedented. We're seeing it, Em, James replied, the awe evident in his voice. This could revolutionize our understanding of great white social structures. Keep that camera rolling. Emily was so engrossed in her observations that she almost missed the first signs of the sharks' changing behavior. Their movements became more agitated, tails sweeping with increased power as they cut through the water. Something's got them. Excited, Emily reported, her scientific curiosity momentarily overriding her growing sense of unease. Possible hunting behavior. I'm seeing more erratic swimming patterns, pectoral fins lowered. Suddenly, one of the smaller sharks charged the cage, its snout colliding with the metal bars with a resounding clang. Emily flinched involuntarily, her heart rate spiking. Whoa, aggressive contact from a juvenile male, she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. Possible dominance display or... Wait, they're all getting more agitated. The sharks began to circle more tightly, their movements becoming increasingly frenzied. Emily's eyes darted from one to another, her mind racing to understand the sudden shift in behavior. Emily, we're seeing some concerning activity up here. Sarah's tense voice came through. We're going to start bringing you up. Before Emily could respond, the largest female shark made a sudden, powerful lunge toward the cage. Its massive body slammed into the metal structure, the impact sending shockwaves through the water. Emily was thrown against the bars, her camera knocked from her grasp. As she scrambled to regain her footing, a sickening sound reached her ears, the groan of metal under stress. Sarah! James! The cage is damaged! Emily shouted into her comm, panic rising in her throat. That loose hinge, it's giving way! Above the surface, chaos erupted on the deck of the research vessel. Sarah was already in her gear, preparing for an emergency dive. James barked orders to the crew, his face a mask of controlled fear. Hang on, Emily. We're bringing you up now. James's voice was strained with urgency. But underwater, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. The damaged hinge had created a gap in the cage's structure, and the sharks, driven into a frenzy by the commotion, were now focusing their attacks on this weak point. Emily pressed herself against the opposite side of the cage, her mind racing. Years of training kicked in, overriding her terror. Stay calm, she muttered to herself. Slow, steady movements. Don't antagonize them. The largest female shark made another pass, its eye rolling back as it prepared to strike. Emily watched, in horror, as the massive jaws clamped down on the loose section of the cage, powerful muscles flexing as it shook its head violently. Metal screeched against teeth, a sound that reverberated through Emily's bones. The cage door swung open, leaving her exposed to the circling predators. Mayday, mayday, Emily screamed into her comm. Cage breach, I repeat, cage breach. In that moment, time seemed to slow. Emily saw the great white release the cage, its body coiling like a spring as it prepared to lunge. She knew she had seconds to act. With a surge of desperate strength, Emily grabbed for the cage door, trying to pull it closed. The metal groaned in protest, the damaged hinge making it nearly impossible to secure. Emily, we're almost there. Sarah's voice seemed distant, drowned out by the pounding of blood in Emily's ears. The great white charged. Emily caught a glimpse of rows of serrated teeth, felt the rush of water displaced by the massive body. In a move born of pure instinct, she ducked, pressing herself into the corner of the cage. Jaws snapped shut mere inches from her leg, the shark's rough skin scraping against her wetsuit as it passed. Emily's scream was muffled by her regulator, bubbles streaming from her mouth in a frantic plume. The other sharks, excited by the commotion, began to circle more tightly. Emily knew that each pass brought them closer, the probability of an attack increasing exponentially. Her scientific mind, even in the midst of terror, couldn't help but analyze the situation. These weren't malevolent monsters. They were apex predators responding to stimuli in their environment. The thought provided little comfort as another shark made a close pass, its eye rolling back as it brushed against the cage. "Emily, grab the emergency ascent line. We're going to pull you up." Sarah's voice cut through the chaos. With shaking hands, Emily reached for the bright yellow line that had been lowered into the cage. As her fingers closed around it, she felt a sharp tug. The largest female shark had returned, its massive body blocking out the sunlight from above. Emily looked up into its black eye, feeling a profound sense of her own mortality. In that moment, she understood with perfect clarity her place in the food chain. "Pulling you up now, Emily. Hold on tight." James's voice was tight with tension. The line began to pull her upward. Emily felt a sudden sharp pain in her leg. Looking down, she saw that in her haste to grab the line, she had caught her calf on a jagged edge of the damaged cage. Blood began to cloud the water around her. "No, no, no," Emily muttered, her voice shaking. She knew what blood in the water meant. The shark's reaction was immediate and terrifying. Their circling became tighter, more frenzied. Emily could feel the rush of water as they passed, drawn by the scent of blood. "Faster! Pull me up faster!" She screamed into her comm, her eyes wide with terror as she watched the largest shark turn toward her, its body tensing for an attack. The surface seemed impossibly far away as Emily was pulled upward. Each second stretched into an eternity. The blue of the ocean around her tinged with red from her bleeding leg. Just as she thought she couldn't hold on any longer, Emily broke the surface. Hands reached down, grabbing her arms and hauling her onto the deck of the boat. She lay there, gasping and shaking, as the reality of her narrow escape washed over her. Sarah was at her side in an instant, checking her for injuries. "Emily, Emily, can you hear me? Are you hurt?" Emily nodded weakly, her voice hoarse as she managed to speak. "My leg. Cut it on the cage. The sharks." James appeared in her field of vision, his face etched with concern and relief. "You're safe now, Emily. We've got you. Medical team is on the way." As the adrenaline began to ebb, Emily felt the full weight of what had just happened crash over her. She had come face to face with the raw power of nature, had stared into the eyes of the ocean's greatest predator, and lived to tell the tale. But as the medical team swarmed around her, as her colleagues peppered her with questions and expressions of relief, Emily found her mind drifting back to those moments in the water. Despite the terror, despite the near-death experience, she couldn't shake the feeling of awe that had washed over her when she first saw that great white materialize from the blue. In that moment, battered and bleeding on the deck of the research vessel, Dr. Emily Carter knew with absolute certainty that her relationship with the ocean and with the magnificent, terrifying creatures that called it home had been forever changed. The tension on the research vessel Carcharodon was palpable as Dr. Emily Carter was pulled from the water, her wetsuit torn and leg bleeding. The crew rushed to her aid, voices overlapping in a cacophony of concern and relief. "Get the first aid kit," James shouted, his usual calm demeanor cracking under the stress. "And someone radio the Coast Guard." Sarah, the dive master, was all ready, kneeling beside Emily, her trained eyes assessing the damage. "Emily, can you hear me? Where does it hurt?" Emily's vision swam, the deck of the boat seeming to tilt and sway more than the gentle waves could account for. She tried to focus on Sarah's face, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. "My leg. The cage. It just gave way." As the medical team swarmed around her, Emily's mind raced back to the moments underwater. The creaking of metal, the flash of teeth, the primal terror that had gripped her. It all came flooding back in vivid detail. "The hinge," she muttered, trying to sit up despite the hands gently restraining her. "I knew something was wrong with that hinge." James knelt beside her, his face a mask of guilt and concern. "Easy, Em. Just lie still. Help is on the way." But Emily couldn't shake the image of the great white's eye rolling back as it charged the cage. "James, you don't understand. The sharks, their behavior changed so suddenly. We need to document this. We need to—" Her words were cut off by a sharp intake of breath as the medical team began to clean her leg wound. The salt water had done its work, leaving the gash angry and inflamed. "This is going to need stitches," one of the medics announced. "We should get her to a hospital as soon as possible." As the immediate crisis began to subside, the reality of what had just transpired started to sink in for the entire crew. Faces pale and drawn, they moved about the deck in a daze, securing equipment and preparing for an emergency return to shore. Alex, the young researcher who had been so excited about the expedition just hours earlier, approached Emily with wide, shocked eyes. "Dr. Carter, I don't understand. What happened down there?" Emily winced as a fresh wave of pain shot through her leg, but she forced herself to focus. This was important. The shark's behavior, it was unlike anything I've ever seen or read about. One minute they were curious, almost playful. The next, she trailed off, the memory of those frenzied moments still too raw. James stepped in, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "We'll debrief fully once Emily's received proper medical attention. For now, let's focus on getting back to shore safely." As the boat's engines roared to life, Emily found herself being carefully moved to a more comfortable position. The adrenaline that had kept her alert was beginning to wear off, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion and a pain that seemed to radiate from her leg throughout her entire body. Sarah sat beside her, holding her hand. "You're going to be okay, Em. You did everything right down there. You kept your head in a situation that would have paralyzed most people with fear." Emily managed a weak smile, grateful for the reassurance. But as she closed her eyes, trying to rest, the image of the great white's massive form charging towards her played on repeat in her mind. The journey back to shore seemed to take an eternity. Every movement of the boat sent fresh waves of pain through Emily's injured leg. The medical team worked tirelessly, monitoring her vitals and doing their best to keep her comfortable. As they neared the coast, the distant wail of sirens could be heard. Emergency services had been alerted and were standing by. Emily felt a mix of relief and embarrassment. This wasn't how she had imagined her groundbreaking research expedition would end. "James," she called out, her voice hoarse. The expedition leader was at her side in an instant. "The data. Make sure someone secures all the footage and sensor readings. We can't lose that no matter what." James nodded, a flicker of the scientist showing through his worried expression. "Already taken care of, Em. Alex is backing everything up as we speak. Your close encounter won't be in vain, I promise you that." As the boat docked, a flurry of activity erupted. Paramedics swarmed aboard, their efficient movements a stark contrast to the shell-shocked research team. Emily found herself being carefully transferred to a stretcher, the faces of her colleagues a blur as she was moved. "We'll meet you at the hospital," Sarah called out as Emily was loaded into the waiting ambulance. "Hang in there, champ." The doors slammed shut, and Emily was enveloped in the sterile, controlled environment of the emergency vehicle. As the ambulance sped towards the hospital, sirens blaring, she finally allowed herself to fully process what had happened. She had come face to face with one of nature's most perfect predators. She had felt the raw power of the great white, had seen death in its black, rolling eye, and somehow, against all odds, she had survived. Tears began to roll down her cheeks, a mix of delayed shock, pain, and an overwhelming sense of humility in the face of nature's awesome power. "You're going to be fine, Dr. Carter," one of the paramedics reassured her, misinterpreting her tears as fear. "We'll have you patched up in no time." Emily nodded, unable to explain that her tears were not just from pain or fear, but from a profound realization. In those terrifying moments underwater, she had gained a perspective on her research subject that no textbook or controlled study could ever provide. At the hospital, Emily was whisked away to the emergency room. The bright lights and clinical efficiency of the medical staff were a jarring contrast to the wild, primal encounter she had just experienced. As doctors examined her leg and prepared for the necessary stitches, Emily found her scientist's mind kicking back into gear. "Excuse me," she called out to one of the nurses. "Is there any way I could get a laptop or tablet? I need to make some notes while everything's still fresh in my mind." The nurse exchanged a bemused look with the doctor. "Let's focus on getting you treated first, Dr. Carter. Your notes can wait a little longer." But Emily was insistent. "You don't understand. What I experienced out there, it could revolutionize our understanding of great white behavior. I can't risk forgetting any details." The doctor, sensing Emily's determination, made a compromise. "How about this? You let us take care of that leg and I'll have someone bring you a recorder. You can dictate your notes while we work. Deal? Emily nodded, grateful for the understanding. As the medical team began to clean and stitch her wound, she closed her eyes and began to recount every detail of the encounter. Subject is a female great white shark, estimated length 18 feet. Initial behavior was curious, circling the cage at a distance of approximately 10 feet. Notable scar on left flank, possibly from boat propeller. She continued her clinical description, her voice steady even as she winced from the sting of antiseptic. The medical staff worked in silence, occasionally exchanging impressed glances at their patient's focus and composure. As Emily delved deeper into her recollection, her voice began to waver. The change in behavior was sudden and dramatic, aggressive. Posturing began approximately 15 minutes into the dive. Pectoral fins lowered, tail beats increased in frequency. She paused, taking a shaky breath. The doctor looked up from his work, concern etched on his face. "Dr. Carter, are you all right? We can take a break if you need to." Emily shook her head, determined to continue. "I'm fine. This is important." She took another deep breath and pressed. Tonstieu, the lead female, initiated the first direct contact with the cage. The impact was significant. I estimate the force to be... Her voice trailed off as the full memory of that moment washed over her. The sound of metal groaning, the rush of water as the shark's massive body slammed into the cage, the primal fear that had gripped her, it all came flooding back. "Dr. Carter?" The nurse's voice seemed to come from far away. "Your heart rate is elevating. Perhaps we should pause for a moment." Emily nodded, suddenly aware of the cold sweat that had broken out across her forehead. She had faced death and survived, but the psychological impact of the encounter was only just beginning to make itself known. As the medical team finished treating her leg, Emily found herself drifting in and out of a light doze. The exhaustion of the day, both physical and emotional, was finally catching up with her. She was roused by a gentle hand on her shoulder. Opening her eyes, she saw James and Sarah standing by her bedside, their faces a mix of relief and lingering concern. "Hey there, Shark Whisperer," Sarah said, attempting a light tone. "How are you feeling?" Emily managed a weak smile. "Like I. Just went 10 rounds with the heavyweight champion of the ocean." James stepped forward, his expression serious. "Emily, I don't even know where to begin. I'm so sorry. The equipment check, the safety protocols, I should have..." Emily cut him off with a shake of her head. "James, stop. We both know the risks involved in this kind of research. What happened out there, it's no one's fault. If anything, it's given us invaluable data." James nodded, though the guilt didn't entirely leave his eyes. "We've secured all the footage and sensor data. Once you're feeling up to it, we'll start analyzing everything. But for now, you need to rest and recover." As her colleagues filled her in on the aftermath of the incident, the media frenzy already brewing, the concerned calls from the university, Emily found her mind drifting back to those moments underwater. She had gone into this expedition, seeing the great whites as subjects to be studied, behaviors to be catalogued and analyzed. But now, having looked into the eye of that magnificent predator, having felt the raw power of nature up close, she knew that her perspective had been forever altered. As she drifted off to sleep, the painkillers finally taking full effect, Carter knew that while her body would heal, her understanding of the ocean and its apex predators had been irrevocably changed. The real work, she realized, was only just beginning. The sterile white of the hospital room was a stark contrast to the deep blues of the ocean that Dr. Emily Carter had been immersed in just hours before. The steady beep of the heart monitor provided a rhythmic backdrop to the chaos of her thoughts as she lay in the bed, her bandaged leg propped up on pillows. A knock at the door pulled Emily from her reverie. "Come in," she called, her voice still hoarse from the salt water and screaming. James entered, his normally composed demeanor showing cracks of fatigue and worry. "How are you feeling, Em?" he asked, pulling up a chair beside her bed. Emily attempted a smile, but it came out more like a grimace. "Like I've been through a meat grinder. But I'm alive, which is more than I thought I'd be able to say a few hours ago." James nodded solemnly. "Emily, I can't begin to tell you how sorry I am. The equipment check, the safety protocols..." "Stop," Emily interrupted, holding up a hand. "We've been over this. It wasn't your fault. If anything, it was mine. I noticed that hinge was off, but I didn't push hard enough to have it fixed." A heavy silence fell between them, the weight of what had transpired pressing down on both their shoulders. "Have you seen the footage?" Emily asked suddenly, her eyes lighting up with a mix of scientific curiosity and residual fear. James hesitated before answering. "Yes, we've reviewed it. Emily, it's intense. Are you sure you're ready to see it?" Emily sat up straighter, wincing. As the movement sent a jolt of pain through her leg. "James, I need to see it. Not just for the research, but for myself. I need to understand what happened out there." Reluctantly, James pulled out a tablet from his bag. As he queued up the video, Emily's heart rate began to climb, the beeping of the monitor increasing in tempo. The footage started, showing Emily's descent into the water. Everything seemed normal at first. The gentle sway of the cage, the crystal, clear water. Then the first shark appeared. Emily's breath caught in her throat as she watched the massive creature glide into view. Even on the small screen, its power and grace were evident. "Pause it," she said suddenly. James complied, looking at her with concern. Emily leaned in, studying the frozen image of the shark. "Look at its eye," she murmured. "There's an intelligence there that we've barely begun to understand." James nodded, his scientific curiosity momentarily overriding his worry. "The way they move, the way they interact. It's far more complex than we've given them credit for." Emily gestured for him to continue the video. As the footage played on, showing more sharks joining the first, she provided a running commentary. "See how they're circling? It's not random. There's a pattern to it, a communication happening that we can't fully decipher yet." Her voice was filled with wonder, despite the knowledge of what was coming next. Then the mood of the video changed. The shark's movements became more erratic, more aggressive. Emily's knuckles whitened as she gripped the edge of the tablet, reliving the terror of those moments. The impact of the shark against the cage came suddenly, the camera shaking violently. Emily flinched involuntarily, her heart monitor spiking. "Emily, maybe we should stop," or James began, but she shook her head vehemently. "No, I need to see this. I need to understand." They watched in tense silence as the events unfolded on screen, the cage door swinging open, Emily's desperate attempts to close it, the heart-stopping moment when the largest shark charged. As the video showed Emily being pulled from the water, James paused it again. He looked at her, his face a mix of awe and concern. "Emily, what you went through, most people wouldn't have survived that, let alone remained cogent enough to continue making scientific observations." Emily leaned back against her pillows, exhaustion washing over her. "It was terrifying," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper, "but also incredible. James, we've been studying these animals for years, but being in that water, seeing them up close like that, it changes everything." A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Sarah, the dive master, poked her head in. "Sorry to interrupt, but there's a detective here. He wants to take your statement, Emily." Emily nodded, steeling herself. As the detective entered, notepad in hand, she straightened up, pushing aside her fatigue and pain. "Dr. Carter," the detective began, "I'm Detective Rodriguez. I know you've been through a lot, but we need to get your account of what happened out there." For the next hour, Emily recounted the events in painstaking detail. She described the initial dive, the appearance of the sharks, the malfunction of the cage. Her voice remained steady, even as she relived the terror of those moments when she was exposed to the open water, face to face with the great white. "And you're certain the cage malfunctioned?" Rodriguez asked, his pen poised over the notepad. "There's no possibility that it was tampered with." Emily's brow furrowed. "Tampered with? No, absolutely not. It was a mechanical failure, pure and simple. Why would you even suggest that?" The detective's face remained impassive. "We have to explore all possibilities, Dr. Carter. An incident like this with the potential for such loss of life, we need to be thorough." As Rodriguez continued his questioning, Emily felt a growing unease. The implication that there might have been foul play involved seemed absurd, yet the detective's persistence suggested he wasn't entirely convinced by the accident theory. After the detective left, Emily turned to James, her face etched with concern. James, why would they think someone might have tampered with the cage? That's crazy, right? James ran a hand through his hair, his exhaustion evident. I don't know, Em. The university, our funders, they're all asking questions. An incident like this, it puts the entire research program under scrutiny. Emily's mind raced. Could someone have actually sabotaged the cage? But why? And who? The implications were staggering. Before she could voice her thoughts, another knock came at the door. This time it was Dr. Elaine Winters, the head of the marine biology department at their university. Emily, thank goodness you're all right, Elaine said, rushing to the bedside. Her relief was palpable, but Emily could see the worry lines etched deeply in her face. Elaine, what's going on? Emily asked. Why is there a detective investigating this as if it were more than an accident? Elaine exchanged a glance with James before responding. Emily, there are concerns. The university board, some of our major donors, they're worried about liability, about the potential fallout from this incident. Emily felt a surge of anger cutting through her fatigue. Fallout? Elaine, we were doing vital research out there. Yes, there are risks, but the potential benefits to our understanding of these creatures— I know, Emily, Elaine interrupted gently. Believe me, I know. But right now, we need to focus on your recovery and on managing the situation. The media's already gotten wind of this and they're spinning it as a sensationalist shark attack story, Emily groaned, letting her head fall back against the pillows. Perfect. Just what we need. More fear-mongering about sharks. As the day wore on, a parade of visitors came through Emily's hospital room. Colleagues offering support, university officials seeking reassurances, even a few journalists trying to sneak in for an exclusive interview. Through it all, Emily's mind kept returning to those moments in the water. The terror, yes, but also the awe. The way the sharks had moved, the intelligence in their eyes. There was so much still to learn, to understand. As night fell and the hospital quieted, Emily found herself alone with her thoughts. She reached for her notebook, wincing as the movement pulled at her injured leg. In the dim light, she began to write, her pen flying across the page. The encounter today has reinforced what I've long suspected, that our understanding of great white sharks is still in its infancy. Their behavior, their social structures, their intelligence, it's all far more complex than we've ever given them credit for. Yes, they are apex predators, capable of terrifying violence, but they are not mindless killing machines. What I saw in that water was a creature of incredible power and grace, yes, but also of surprising complexity. We cannot let fear dictate our approach to these animals. The incident today was terrifying, nearly fatal, but it has only strengthened my resolve to continue this research. We must push forward, must strive to understand these creatures not just for their sake, but for ours. The oceans are changing, warming. Shark populations are under threat worldwide. If we don't make the effort to truly understand these animals, to see them as the complex, vital parts of the ecosystem that they are, we risk losing them forever. I went into those waters, seeing the great whites as subjects to be studied. I emerged seeing them as fellow inhabitants of this planet, worthy of our respect, our awe, and yes, our caution. The work continues. It must continue. For the sake of science, for the sake of our oceans, and for the sake of these magnificent creatures that we still know so little about. Emily put down her pen, her hand cramping from the furious writing. Outside her window, she could see the moon reflecting off the distant ocean. Somewhere out there, the sharks were still swimming, still hunting, still living their complex lives largely hidden from human understanding. As she drifted off to sleep, Emily's dreams were filled not with terror, but with a renewed sense of purpose. The encounter had nearly killed her, yes, but it had also awakened something in her, a deeper appreciation for the raw power of nature, and an even stronger determination to bridge the gap between human fear and understanding. The real work, she realized as sleep finally claimed her, was only just beginning. Dr. Emily Carter's hospital room had become a whirlwind of activity in the days following her near-fatal encounter with the great white shark. Doctors, nurses, colleagues, and even a few persistent journalists had been cycling through, each with their own questions and concerns. But on this particular morning, Emily found herself facing a different kind of challenge. Dr. Carter, I understand. your eagerness to return to your research, but I must strongly advise against it, Dr. Ramirez, her attending physician, said with a frown. Your injuries are still healing and the psychological trauma— Emily cut him off, her voice firm despite the lingering pain. With all due respect, Dr. Ramirez, I'm well aware of my condition, but I can't just lie here while our entire research project hangs in the balance. Dr. Ramirez sighed, clearly used to dealing with stubborn patients. At least consider a few more days of rest. Your body needs time to recover. As the doctor left, Emily's research partner James entered the room. His face showed a mix of concern and excitement. How are you feeling, Em? Ready to make a break for it? Emily managed a wry smile. More than ready. Please tell me you've got good news. James pulled up a chair, his expression turning serious. Well, it's a bit of a mixed bag. The university board is still on edge about the whole incident. They're talking about suspending the research program pending a full investigation. Emily's heart sank. They can't do that. We're on the verge of breakthrough. The data we collected, even from that day, it's invaluable. I know, James said, running a hand through his hair. But there's more. Remember that detective who was asking all those questions? Well, he's been sniffing around the lab, asking about our equipment, our protocols. Emily's brow furrowed. He still thinks there might have been foul play. That's ridiculous. Who would want to sabotage our research? James shrugged. Your guess is as good as mine. But listen, there's a silver lining. Dr. Winters has managed to secure us a meeting with the board tomorrow. It's our chance to make our case, to show them why this research needs to continue. Emily's eyes lit up with determination. Then we better make it count. Help me up, will you? We've got work to do. Despite the protests of the nursing staff, Emily spent the next few hours poring over data with James. They analyzed footage, cross-referenced behavioral patterns, and prepared a compelling presentation for the board. As evening approached, Sarah, the dive master, stopped by. Her usual cheerful demeanor was subdued. Hey, Sharkbait, how are you holding up? Emily looked up from her laptop, offering a tired smile. Been better, but I'm managing. How are things on the boat? Sarah's expression darkened. Tense. The crews. Spooked, Em. Some are talking about quitting, and the equipment. That detective had us go over everything with a fine-tooth comb. Found nothing out of the ordinary, of course, but it's got everyone on edge. Emily leaned back, wincing slightly as her injuries protested the movement. We need to get back out there, Sarah. The longer we wait, the more momentum we lose. Not just with the research, but with the team's morale. Sarah nodded, but her concern was evident. I get it, I do, but Em, you almost died out there. No one would blame you if you wanted to take a step back, maybe focus on the data analysis for a while. For a moment, Emily was quiet, her gaze distant. When she spoke, her voice was soft but resolute. I can't do that, Sarah. What happened out there, it was terrifying, yes, but it was also incredible. We saw behaviors, interactions that we've only theorized about before. I can't walk away from that. Sarah studied her friend's face, seeing the mix of fear and determination. All right then. If you're in, I'm in. But we do this smart, okay? No unnecessary risks. As Sarah left, Emily turned back to her work, but her mind was racing. The incident had shaken her, there was no denying that. Every time she closed her eyes, she could see the shark's massive form charging towards her, could feel the rush of water as its powerful body passed mere inches from her. But mixed with that fear was an overwhelming sense of awe. The raw power, the primal grace of these creatures, it was unlike anything she had ever experienced, and she knew deep in her bones that there was still so much to learn. The next morning dawned bright and clear. Emily, against medical advice, checked herself out of the hospital. James met her at the entrance, his car idling at the curb. You sure about this? He asked as he helped her into the passenger seat. Emily nodded, her jaw set with determination. Absolutely. Let's go save our research. The drive to the university was tense, both of them lost in thought. As they pulled into the parking lot, Emily spotted Dr. Winters waiting for them, her expression a mix of concern and hope. Emily, James, she greeted them. Are you ready for this? Emily took a deep breath, steadying herself. As ready as we'll ever be. Let's do it. The boardroom was intimidating, filled with stern-faced administrators and a few key donors. Emily could feel their skeptical gazes as she limped to the front of the room, James at her side. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice stronger than she felt. "I understand your concerns. What happened last week was a tragedy, and one that we take very seriously. But I'm here today to tell you why it's crucial that our research continues." For the next hour, Emily and James presented their findings. They showed footage of unprecedented shark behaviors, data on migration patterns that could revolutionize conservation efforts, and projections of how their research could impact everything, from marine ecology to human safety in coastal areas. As they concluded, the room was silent for a long moment. Then one of the board members leaned forward. "Dr. Carter, your passion is evident, and the potential value of this research is clear. But how can we justify continuing a program that nearly cost you your life?" Emily met his gaze steadily. "Because the cost of not continuing is far greater. These creatures, as dangerous as they can be, are vital to our ocean ecosystems. If we don't understand them, if we let fear dictate our actions, we risk losing them forever. And that loss would have consequences far beyond what we can imagine." She paused, looking around the room. "Yes, there are risks, but every great scientific breakthrough has come with risks. We've learned from what happened, we've reviewed and improved our safety protocols, and we're ready to get back out there and continue this vital work." The room erupted into discussion. Emily and James answered questions, addressed concerns, and passionately defended their research. As the meeting drew to a close, Dr. Winters stood up. "We'll need time to deliberate," she announced. "But I want to thank Dr. Carter and Dr. Reeves for their compelling presentation. We'll have our decision by the end of the week." As they left the boardroom, Emily felt a mix of exhaustion and hope. She had given it everything she had. Now, all they could do was wait. The next few days were a blur of anxiety and anticipation. Emily threw herself into analyzing the data they had collected, desperate to keep her mind occupied. James and Sarah kept her updated on the mood at the lab and on the research vessel. Finally, on Friday afternoon, Dr. Winters called. Emily put the phone on speaker so James could hear. "The board has reached a decision," Dr. Winters said, her voice giving nothing away. "They've agreed to allow the research to continue, but with some conditions. We'll need to implement additional safety measures, and there will be more oversight from the university." Emily and James exchanged elated looks. "That's fantastic news, Dr. Winters," Emily said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you, we won't let you down." As she hung up, Emily felt a wave of relief wash over her. They had done it. The research would continue. "We did it, James," she said, a grin spreading across her face. "We're going back out there." James nodded, his own excitement evident. "Indeed we are, but Em, are you sure you're ready for this? No one would blame you if you needed more time." Emily's expression turned serious. "I won't lie, James, I'm scared. What happened out there, it's going to stay with me for a long time, but I'm also more determined than ever. We're on the verge of something big here, I can feel it." She stood up, wincing slightly as her healing leg protested. "Those sharks, as terrifying as they can be, they're not just mindless killing machines. They're complex, intelligent creatures that we've barely begun to understand. And if we don't make the effort to truly comprehend them, to see them as the vital part of our ecosystem that they are, we risk losing them forever." Emily walked to the window, looking out at the distant ocean. Somewhere out there, the sharks were swimming, living their lives largely hidden from human understanding. We have a responsibility, James, not just to science, but to the oceans, to the planet. We need to bridge the gap between human fear and understanding, and that's exactly what we're going to do. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow across the water, Emily felt a renewed sense of purpose. The encounter had nearly killed her, yes, but it had also awakened something in her, a deeper appreciation for the raw power of nature, and an even stronger determination to uncover the secrets of these magnificent, misunderstood creatures. The real work, she realized, was only just beginning. And she was ready for it. The salty breeze whipped across the deck of the research vessel Carcharodon as Dr. Emily Carter stood at the railing, her eyes fixed on the horizon. It had been 6 weeks since her near-fatal encounter with the great white shark, and today marked her return to the waters off Guadalupe Island. "You ready for this, Em?" James asked, coming to stand beside her. His voice held a mix of concern and excitement. Emily took a deep breath, her hand unconsciously moving. "Tattoo her now-healed leg. As ready as I'll ever be," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. The boat hummed with activity as the research team made final preparations for the dive. New safety protocols were being double and triple checked, the result of intense scrutiny following Emily's accident. Sarah, the dive master, approached with a clipboard in hand. "All right, folks, let's go over the plan one more time," she announced, gathering the team around her. As Sarah detailed the dive procedures, Emily found her mind drifting back to that fateful day. The memory of the shark's massive form charging towards her was still vivid, sending a shiver down her spine despite the warm sun. "Dr. Carter," Sarah's voice snapped Emily back to the present. "Any questions about the new safety measures?" Emily shook her head, forcing a smile. "No, I think we've got it covered. Let's do this." As the team dispersed to their stations, James pulled Emily aside. "Listen, Em, if you're having second thoughts, there's no shame in sitting this one out. We can always—" "James," Emily interrupted, her voice firm. "I appreciate the concern, I really do, but I need to do this. Not just for the research, but for myself." James studied her face for a moment before nodding. "All right, but you give the signal at any time and we'll pull you up. No questions asked," Emily agreed, feeling a surge of gratitude for her friend and colleague. As the dive cage was prepared for lowering, Emily went through her pre-dive checklist with meticulous care. Each piece of equipment was inspected, every strap and seal tested. The new cage, reinforced and equipped with additional safety features, gleamed in the sunlight. "Comms check," Sarah's voice crackled through Emily's earpiece. "How are you reading, Em?" "Loud and clear," Emily responded, her heart rate picking up as she realized the moment of truth was approaching. With a final nod to James and Sarah, Emily stepped into the cage. The metal door clanged shut behind her, the sound echoing in her ears like a foreboding bell. As the crane whirred to life and the cage began its descent into the azure waters, Emily closed her eyes, taking deep, measured breaths. The cool water enveloped her, a sensation that once brought comfort but now carried an edge of anxiety. "Cage secure at 30 feet, James's voice came through the comm system. "How are you doing, Em?" Emily opened her eyes, taking in the underwater landscape around her. The visibility was excellent, the volcanic rocks of Guadalupe Island visible in the distance. "I'm okay," she replied, surprised to find that it wasn't entirely a lie. "No sign of our toothy friends yet." The minutes ticked by, each moment simultaneously stretching into eternity and passing in a blur. Emily found herself falling back into the familiar routine of observation and data collection, her scientific mind engaging despite her lingering fear. Suddenly, a dark shape appeared in the distance. Emily's breath caught in her throat as she recognized the distinctive silhouette of a great white shark. "Contact 3 o'clock, she reported, her voice barely above a whisper. "Adult female, approximately 16 feet. The shark glided through the water. With effortless grace, its powerful body propelled by sweeps of its crescent-shaped tail. As it drew closer, Emily found herself face to face with those black, inscrutable eyes once again. Time seemed to stand still as shark and scientist regarded each other. In that moment, Emily felt a complex mix of emotions. Fear, yes, but also awe, respect, and a renewed sense of purpose. "Emily, your heart rate's spiking. Do you need us to bring you up?" Sarah's concerned voice broke through the moment. Taking a deep breath, Emily replied, "No, I'm all right. She's beautiful." As the shark continued to circle the cage, Emily's initial fear began to give way to her scientific curiosity. She observed and recorded every detail, the shark's movement patterns, its interactions with the smaller fish in the area, the way its gills flexed as it passed. "James, are you seeing this?" Emily asked, her voice filled with excitement. "The way she's moving, it's almost like she's investigating us. There's a clear intelligence in her behavior." "We're seeing it, Em," James replied, his own excitement evident. "This is incredible data. How are you holding up?" Emily paused, taking stock of her emotions. The fear was still there, a low hum in the background, but it was overshadowed by a sense of wonder and a burning desire to understand these magnificent creatures. "I'm good, James, really good," she said, a smile in her voice. "Let's extend the dive if possible. I want to gather as much data as we can." As the dive continued, more sharks appeared. Emily observed their interactions, noting behaviors that challenged many of their previous assumptions about great white social structures. When it was finally time to ascend, Emily felt a surprising reluctance to leave. As the cage broke the surface, she was greeted by the cheers and applause of her research team. Climbing out of the cage on slightly shaky legs, Emily was immediately enveloped in a hug by Sarah. "You did it, Em. You really did it." James approached, his face beaming with pride. "That was some of the best observational data we've ever collected. How do you feel?" Emily took a moment to consider the question. "Honestly, I feel alive, more alive than I've felt in weeks. It was terrifying and exhilarating and absolutely necessary." As the team began to process the day's data, Emily found herself drawn once again to the railing, looking out over the ocean. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. "You know," she said to James, who had joined her, "when I was down there, face to face with that first shark, I had a realization." "Oh?" James prompted, curious. Emily nodded, her eyes still on the horizon. "We've been approaching our research all wrong. We've been studying these animals as if they're just subjects, data points to be collected and analyzed. But they're so much more than that." She turned to face James, her eyes alight with passion. "These sharks, they're not just predators or potential threats. They're a vital part of this ecosystem, intelligent creatures with complex behaviors that we've barely begun to understand. And if we don't make the effort to truly comprehend them, to see them as the magnificent beings they are, we risk losing them forever." James listened intently, nodding slowly. "So what do you propose?" "A paradigm shift," Emily said, her voice filled with determination. "We need to approach our research not just from a scientific standpoint, but from one of genuine understanding and respect. We need to bridge the gap between human fear and comprehension." She gestured out to the ocean. "What happened to me was traumatic, yes, but it also gave me a perspective that few researchers ever get. We have a responsibility, James, not just to science, but to these creatures and to the oceans they inhabit." As the last rays of sunlight dipped below the horizon, Emily felt a renewed sense of purpose washing over her. The fear was still there, a reminder of the power and potential danger of the creatures she studied. But it was tempered now by a deep respect and an even stronger determination to uncover the secrets of these misunderstood giants of the sea. "We've got a lot of work ahead of us," she said, turning back to the bustling activity on the deck. "But I think we're on the verge of something revolutionary." James smiled, clapping a hand on her shoulder. "Lead the way, Dr. Carter. I have a feeling this is just the beginning." As night fell and the stars began to twinkle above, the Carcharodon set course back to shore. But for Emily, it felt less like an end and more like a new beginning. The real work, she realized, was only just starting, and she was ready for every moment of it. The fluorescent lights of the university conference room cast a harsh glow over the assembled faces. Dr. Emily Carter stood at the podium, her hands resting lightly on its edges as she surveyed the crowd. Journalists, academics, and environmental activists filled the seats, an air of anticipation hanging heavy in the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," Emily began, her voice steady despite the flutter of nerves in her stomach, "thank you for coming today. What I'm about to present will change the way we view great white sharks and, I hope, the way we approach marine conservation as a whole." She clicked a button, and behind her, a massive screen flickered to life. Footage from her recent dives filled the display, great whites gliding through azure waters, their movements graceful and purposeful. "For years, we've viewed these animals as mindless killing machines, driven purely by instinct and hunger," Emily continued. "But our recent studies have revealed a level of social complexity and intelligence that challenges everything we thought we knew." As Emily delved into the details of her research, the room hung on her every word. She presented data on communication, patterns between sharks, evidence of cooperative hunting behaviors, and even instances of what appeared to be play between individuals. But perhaps most groundbreaking, Emily said, her voice dropping slightly as she prepared to reveal their most controversial finding, is the evidence we've gathered suggesting a form of cultural transmission among great white populations. A murmur rippled through the audience. Emily clicked to the next slide, showing a series of images depicting unique hunting techniques observed in specific shark groups. These behaviors are not universal among great whites, she explained. They appear to be learned and passed down within distinct populations. In essence, we're seeing the emergence of what can only be described as shark cultures. As Emily concluded her presentation, the room erupted into a flurry of questions. Hands shot up across the audience, voices clamoring to be heard. "Dr. Carter," a journalist in the front row called out, "how do you respond to critics who say your findings are exaggerated, possibly influenced by your traumatic experience?" Emily took a deep breath, having anticipated this line of questioning. "My experience, traumatic as it was, has given me a unique perspective. It hasn't clouded my judgment, it's sharpened it. Every piece of data we've presented has been meticulously collected and peer-reviewed. These aren't exaggerations, they're observations that challenge our preconceptions," another voice piped up from the back. "But don't your findings make it harder to justify culling programs aimed at protecting beaches?" "On the contrary," Emily responded, her voice firm. "Understanding these animals better allows us to develop more effective, non-lethal methods of ensuring human safety while preserving these crucial apex predators." The questions continued for nearly an hour, ranging from technical inquiries about research methods to broader philosophical discussions about the nature of animal intelligence. Through it all, Emily stood her ground, her passion for the subject evident in every response. As the conference wound down, Emily felt a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. She had laid out their findings, defended their research, and hopefully begun to shift the narrative around these misunderstood creatures. James approached as the last of the journalists filed out, a broad grin on his face. "You were brilliant, Em, absolutely brilliant." Emily managed a tired smile. "Thanks, James, I just hope it makes a difference." "Dr. Carter," a voice interrupted them. Emily turned to see a young woman approaching, notepad in hand. "Lydia Chen, from the Ocean Conservation Foundation. I was wondering if I could ask a few more questions." Emily glanced at James, who nodded encouragingly. "Of course, Ms. Chen. What would you like to know?" Lydia's questions were thoughtful and incisive, delving into the implications of Emily's research for marine protected areas and international fishing regulations. As they talked, Emily found herself impressed by the young woman's knowledge and passion. "One last question, Dr. Carter," Lydia said, her pen poised over her notepad. "Given what you've learned, what do you think is the most important step we can take to protect great whites and their habitats?" Emily considered for a moment before responding. "Education," she said finally. "We need to change the narrative around these animals. They're not the monsters of myth and movie. They're complex, intelligent creatures playing a vital role in our oceans. If we can help people understand that, really understand it, then support for conservation efforts will follow." As Lydia thanked her and left, Emily felt a renewed sense of purpose. The conference had been just the beginning. There was so much more work to be done. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Emily's presentation had sparked intense debate in scientific circles and captured public imagination. Requests for interviews poured in, and Emily found herself juggling media appearances with her ongoing research. One evening, as she sat in her office poring over the latest data from their tracking buoys, there was a knock at the door. "Come in." Emily called, not looking up from her computer screen. "Working late again, I see." James's voice came from the doorway. "You know, normal people go home at some point." Emily glanced up, a wry smile on her face. "Since when have we ever been normal?" James chuckled, dropping into a chair across from her desk. "Fair point, but seriously, Em, you need to pace yourself. We've got a long road ahead." Emily sighed, leaning back in her chair. I know. It's just, there's so much to do. So much we still don't understand. And every day we delay is another day these animals are at risk." James nodded, his expression turning serious. "I get it. But you're no good to the sharks if you burn yourself out." Besides, he added with a grin, we've got some exciting news. Emily perked up at this. Oh, do tell. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration called, James said, his eyes twinkling. They want to partner with us on an expanded research program, more funding, more resources, and a chance to implement some of those protection strategies. So you've been developing. Emily's jaw dropped. James, that's incredible. When did this happen? Just got off the phone with them, he replied. They were very impressed with our latest findings. Said something about pioneering work in the field of shark ethology. Emily let out a laugh that was half disbelief, half joy. I can't believe it. This could change everything. It's a game changer, all right, James agreed. But it also means we've got our work cut out for us, which is why he stood up, grabbing Emily's jacket from the back of her chair. You're going to go home, get some rest, and come back fresh tomorrow. We've got a lot of planning to do. Emily wanted to protest, but she knew James was right. As exciting as the news was, she needed to approach this next phase with a clear head. As she drove home that night, her mind raced with possibilities. Expanded protection zones, new non-lethal deterrent technologies, educational programs, the potential was enormous. The next morning, Emily arrived at the lab early, invigorated and ready to tackle the challenges ahead. She found James already, there surrounded by maps and charts. Morning, Em, he greeted her. Ready to save some sharks? Emily grinned, rolling up her sleeves. Always. Where do we start? As they dove into the planning, Emily felt a profound sense of gratitude. Just months ago, she had been fighting for her life in these very waters. Now she was fighting for the lives of the creatures that had nearly taken hers. The irony wasn't lost on her, but neither was the beauty of it. Her brush with death had given her a unique perspective, one that she was now using to bridge the gap between human fear and understanding. As the day wore on, filled with calls to NOAA officials, discussions with their research team, and endless rounds of planning, Emily found herself returning again and again to the memory of that first dive after her accident. The fear, the awe, the moment of connection with a creature so different, yet so vital to the health of our planet. You know, she said to James as they were wrapping up for the day, sometimes I think about how close I came to giving all this up after the accident. James looked up from his notes, his expression softening. I remember. You were pretty shaken up. Emily nodded. I was terrified. But going back out there, facing that fear, it changed everything. It made me realize that these animals, as powerful and potentially dangerous as they are also incredibly vulnerable. They need our understanding, our protection. She walked to the window, looking out at the ocean in the distance. We have a chance here, James. A chance to change the way people see these creatures, to ensure they have a future in our changing oceans. James joined her at the window, placing a hand on her shoulder. And we will, Em. One shark at a time, one mind at a time, we'll change the narrative. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, Emily felt a sense of peace wash over her. The road ahead would be challenging, filled with obstacles both scientific and social. But she was ready for it. Her encounter with the great white had nearly ended her life, but in many ways it had also given her a new one. A life dedicated not just to studying these magnificent creatures, but to ensuring their survival and changing the way the world saw them. As she gathered her things to head home, Emily paused at the door of the lab, looking back at the charts and maps and data that represented their work. She smiled to herself, feeling the familiar mix of excitement and determination that had driven her since that fateful day in the water. The real work was just beginning, and Dr. Emily Carter was ready for every moment of it. The rhythmic beeping of the heart rate monitor filled the small hospital room as Dr. Emily Carter slowly opened her eyes. The stark white ceiling came into focus, a harsh reminder of where she was and why. She tried to sit up, wincing as pain shot through her leg. Easy there, Tiger, a familiar voice said. Emily turned to see Sarah, the dive master, sitting in a chair beside her bed. The doctor said you need to take it easy for a while. Emily managed a weak smile. How long have I been out? About 18 hours, Sarah replied, her face etched with concern. You gave us quite a scare, Em. The events of the previous day came flooding back, The dive, the malfunctioning cage, the terrifying moments face to face with the great white. Emily shuddered involuntarily. "The others?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "All fine," Sarah assured her. "A bit shaken up, but fine. You're the one who decided to get up close and personal with our toothy friend." Before Emily could respond, the door opened and Dr. James Reeves, her research partner, walked in. His face lit up when he saw her. "Awake. Emily, thank God," he said, rushing to her bedside. "How are you feeling?" "Like I went 10 rounds with a shark," Emily replied dryly, which I suppose isn't far from the truth. James's expression turned serious. About the accident. The university is launching a full investigation. They're talking about suspending the research program." Emily's heart sank. "They can't do that. James, the data we've collected, the behaviors we've observed, it's groundbreaking. We can't stop now." I know, James said, running a hand through his hair. "But after what happened, Emily, you almost died out there." A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. A tall man in a suit entered, his expression grave. "Dr. Carter." "I'm Detective Rodriguez," he said, flashing a badge. "I was hoping I could ask you a few questions about the incident." Emily exchanged a worried glance with James before nodding. "Of course, Detective. What would you like to know?" For the next hour, Rodriguez grilled Emily about every detail of the dive. His questions were pointed, focusing particularly on the equipment and safety protocols. "And you're certain the cage malfunctioned?" he asked, his pen poised over his notepad. "There's no possibility it was tampered with," Emily's brow furrowed. "Tampered with? No, absolutely not. It was a mechanical failure, pure and simple. Why would you even suggest that?" Rodriguez's face remained impassive. "We have to explore all possibilities, Dr. Carter. An incident like this, with the potential for such loss of life, we need to be thorough." After the detective left, an uneasy silence fell over the room. James was the first to break it. "Emily, what if he's right? What if someone did tamper with the equipment?" Emily shook her head vehemently. "No, I refuse to believe that. Who would want to sabotage our research, and why?" Before James could respond, Dr. Elaine Winters, the head of their department, entered the room. Her face was a mask of concern and relief. "Emily, thank goodness you're all right," she said, moving to the bedside. "How are you feeling?" "I've been better," Emily admitted, "but I'm more worried about the research program. Elaine, please tell me they're not really considering shutting us down." Elaine sighed heavily. "It's not just the university, Emily. Some of our major donors are expressing concerns. They're worried about liability, about negative publicity." Emily felt a surge of frustration. "Don't they understand what's at stake here? We're on the verge of breakthrough discoveries about great white behavior, findings that could revolutionize conservation efforts." "I know," Elaine said softly, "and I'm fighting for you, for the program, but Emily, you have to understand what happened out there. It's not just about the research anymore. It's become a media sensation." As if on cue, the TV in the corner of the room, which had been muted, flashed with breaking news. The headline read, "Shark attack or research gone wrong? Questions surround near-fatal incident." Emily watched in dismay as footage from their research boat played across the screen, followed by sensationalized reenactments of the accident. "This is a nightmare," she muttered. James placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "We'll get through this, Em. We'll find a way to continue the research." Over the next few days, as Emily recovered in the hospital, the media frenzy only intensified. Reporters camped outside hoping for a statement. Emily's phone buzzed constantly with messages from colleagues, friends, and even a few shark conservation groups offering support. One afternoon, as Emily was flipping through the channels, trying to escape the endless coverage of her accident, she stumbled upon a nature documentary about great whites. She paused, watching as the magnificent creatures glided through the water. In that moment, something shifted inside her. The fear and trauma of her experience began to give way to a renewed sense of purpose. These animals, as dangerous as they could be, were also incredibly misunderstood. And now, more than ever, they needed advocates who could speak to their importance in the ecosystem. When James visited later that day, he found Emily surrounded by notebooks and her laptop, furiously scribbling notes. "What's all this?" he asked, gesturing to the papers strewn across her bed. Emily looked up, her eyes bright with determination. Our next steps. James, I've been thinking. This accident, as terrible as it was, has given us a platform. People are paying attention to sharks in a way they never have before. James raised an eyebrow. You're not serious. Emily, you nearly died. The university is talking about shutting us down. How can you be thinking about next steps? Emily sat up straighter, wincing slightly at the movement. Because this is bigger than me, bigger than our program. James, we have a chance here to change the narrative around these animals, to use this media attention to educate people about the reality of great whites, not just the sensationalized version they see in movies. She handed him one of her notebooks. Look at these ideas. Public education programs, partnerships with marine sanctuaries, new safety protocols that could revolutionize shark research. We can turn this setback into an opportunity. James flipped through the pages, his expression shifting from skepticism to intrigue. This is actually not bad. But Emily, you're talking about a massive undertaking. The funding alone will come, Emily interrupted. Think about it. All these news outlets clamoring for our story. What if we give it to them, but on our terms? We could use this attention to launch a crowdfunding campaign to appeal to conservation groups. We could turn public fear into fascination. As James Beats Hansi continued to read, Emily could see the wheels turning in his mind. Finally, he looked up, a small smile playing on his lips. You're crazy, you know that, he said. Absolutely crazy, but maybe that's exactly what we need right now. Over the next week, as Emily's physical wounds began to heal, she and James worked tirelessly on their new plan. They drafted proposals, reached out to contacts in the media and conservation world, and began to shape a new narrative around their research. The day before Emily was set to be released from the hospital, Dr. Winters visited again. This time, her expression was cautiously optimistic. I've just come from a meeting with the board, she announced. They've agreed to continue the research program with some conditions. Enhanced safety measures, more oversight, and, she paused, a smile breaking through her professional demeanor. They want to launch a public education initiative alongside other research, something about changing the narrative around sharks. Emily and James exchanged triumphant looks. Their plan was working. As Elaine left, promising to return with more details, Emily turned to James. We did it, she said softly. We're going to continue our work. James nodded, his expression serious. We did. But Emily, are you sure you're ready for this? No one would blame you if you wanted to step back. Maybe focus on data analysis for a while. Emily was quiet for a moment, her gaze drifting to the window where she could just make out the distant shimmer of the ocean. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't scared, she admitted. The thought of getting back in that water, it terrifies me. But James, what I experienced out there, it wasn't just fear. It was awe. Those creatures, as dangerous as they can be, they're magnificent, intelligent, complex. And if we don't make the effort to understand them, to protect them, we risk losing something irreplaceable. She turned back to James, her eyes shining with determination. So yes, I'm scared, but I'm also more committed than ever. We have work to do, James, important work, and I'm ready for it. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, Emily felt a sense of anticipation building within her. The road ahead would be challenging, filled with obstacles both physical and psychological, but she was prepared to face them. Her encounter with the great white had nearly ended her life, but in many ways it had also given her a new one. A life dedicated not just to studying these magnificent creatures, but to ensuring their survival and changing the way the world saw them. As she began to pack up her things, preparing to leave the hospital the next day, Emily paused, looking out at the ocean once more. Somewhere out there, the sharks were swimming, living their lives largely hidden from human understanding. But not for long, she thought with a smile. Not if she had anything to say about it. The real work was just beginning, and Dr. Emily Carter was ready for every moment of it. The sun had barely crested the horizon when Dr. Emily Carter arrived at the research facility. The cool morning air carried the tang of salt, a constant reminder of the vast ocean just beyond the shore. As she made her way through the building, the familiar scents of antiseptic and preserved specimens mingled with the aroma of fresh coffee. Emily paused at the door to the main lab, taking a deep breath to steady herself. It had been 3 months since her near-fatal encounter with the great white shark, and today marked her official return to full-time research duties. She pushed open the door, greeted by the hum of equipment and the excited chatter of her team. "Dr. Carter?" Alex, one of the younger researchers, called out. "Welcome back." Emily smiled, touched by the genuine warmth in his voice. "Thanks, Alex. It's good to be back. What have I missed?" As Alex launched into an enthusiastic rundown of their recent findings, Emily felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned to see James, her research partner and closest friend, holding out a steaming mug of coffee. "Thought you might need this," he said with a knowing smile. "Big day ahead." Emily accepted the mug gratefully, inhaling the rich aroma. "You have no idea how much I've missed this. Hospital coffee just doesn't cut it." James chuckled, but his eyes held a hint of concern. "How are you really doing, Em? You sure you're ready for this?" Emily took a sip of coffee, considering her answer. "Honestly, I'm nervous, but I'm also excited. We've got so much work to do, James. I can't let fear hold me back." Before James could respond, Dr. Elaine Winters, the head of their department, entered the lab. Her presence immediately commanded attention, conversations dying down as all eyes turned to her. "Good morning, everyone," Elaine began, her voice crisp and authoritative. "As you all know, today marks the official relaunch of our Great White Research Program. Dr. Carter's return is not just a personal triumph, but a victory for our entire field of study." Emily felt a flush of embarrassment at being the center of attention, but Elaine continued, "However, we must remember that with this second chance comes greater responsibility. The university board and our donors will be watching us closely. We cannot afford any more incidents." The room fell silent, the weight of Elaine's words settling over the team. Emily stepped forward, feeling the need to address her colleagues. "Dr. Winters is right," she began, her voice steady despite the flutter of nerves in her stomach. "What happened to me was a wake-up call, but it's also an opportunity. We have a chance here to not just continue our research, but to revolutionize it." She paused, looking around at the faces of her team. "We're going to implement new safety protocols, yes, but we're also going to push our understanding of these magnificent creatures further than ever before. The work we do here could change the way the world sees great whites, could be the key to their conservation. Are you all with me?" A chorus of agreement rose from the team, the excitement in the room palpable. Elaine nodded approvingly before turning to Emily. "Well said, Dr. Carter. Now, if you're ready, we have a conference call with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration in 10 minutes. They're very interested in our new research proposals." As Emily followed Elaine out of the lab, she caught James's eye. He gave her a thumbs up, mouthing, "You've got this." She smiled back, feeling a surge of gratitude for her friend and colleague. Conference call with NOAA was intense but productive. Emily found herself falling back into the rhythm of scientific discussion, her passion for the subject overriding any lingering anxiety. As she outlined their plans for new non-invasive tracking methods and behavioral studies, she could hear the excitement in the NOAA representatives' voices. "Dr. Carter, this is fascinating stuff," Dr. Michael Chen, the lead NOAA scientist, said, as the call was wrapping up. "Your personal experience seems to have given you a unique perspective on these animals." Emily paused, considering her words carefully. "It has, Dr. Chen. Coming face to face with a great white, it changes you, but not in the way most people might think. Yes, there's fear, but there's also an overwhelming sense of awe, of respect. These creatures aren't the mindless killing machines they're often portrayed as. They're complex, intelligent, animals that play a crucial role in our ocean ecosystems." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. Then, "Well said, Dr. Carter. I think I speak for all of us at NOAA when I say we're looking forward to seeing where this research leads. You have our full support." As the call ended, Elaine turned to Emily, a rare smile on her face. "Impressive. Dr. Carter, very impressive indeed. I think we can count on NOAA's backing for the foreseeable future. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of meetings and preparations. By early afternoon, Emily found herself standing on the dock, staring out at the research vessel that would take them back out to the Great White Feeding Grounds. "Earth to Emily," Sarah's voice broke through her thoughts. The dive master approached, carrying a stack of equipment. "You okay there? You looked 1,000,000 miles away." Emily shook her head, trying to clear the memories of her last dive from her mind. "Just thinking. It's been a while since I've been out there." Sarah's expression softened. "Hey, no one would blame you if you wanted to sit this one out. We can handle the data collection if you're not ready." "No," Emily said firmly. "I need to do this. For myself, for the research, for the sharks." Sarah studied her for a moment, before nodding. "All right then, let's get you geared up." As they prepared for the dive, Emily could feel the eyes of the team on her. She knew they were worried, knew that her actions today would set the tone for the entire relaunch of the program. Taking a deep breath, she forced herself to focus on the task at hand, methodically checking and double-checking her equipment. Finally, it was time. As the boat cut through the waves, heading out to the designated research area, Emily stood at the railing, letting the sea spray wash over her face. The familiar excitement of scientific discovery began to bubble up inside her, warring with the lingering tendrils of fear. 2 minutes to target location. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom. Emily turned to face her team. "All right, everyone. Remember the new protocols. Safety is our top priority, but let's not forget why we're out here. These animals are counting on us to tell their story, to help the world understand their importance. Let's make it count." As the cage was lowered into the water, Emily took one last look at James. He gave her a reassuring nod. "We're right here with you, Em. You've got this." Taking a deep breath, Emily stepped into the cage. The metal door clanged shut behind her, the sound echoing in her ears like a final warning. As the crane whirred to life and the cage began to descend, Emily closed her eyes, focusing on her breathing. The cool water enveloped her, a sensation that once brought comfort, but now carried an edge of anxiety. She opened her eyes, taking in the blue expanse around her. The visibility was excellent, the volcanic rocks of the seafloor visible in the distance. "Comm check," Sarah's voice crackled through her earpiece. "How are you doing, Em?" "I'm okay," Emily replied, surprised to find that it wasn't entirely a lie. No sign of our toothy friends yet. Minutes ticked by, each moment simultaneously stretching into eternity and passing in a blur. Emily found herself falling back into the familiar routine of observation and data collection, her scientific mind engaging despite her lingering fear. Suddenly, a dark shape appeared in the distance. Emily's breath caught in her throat as she recognized the distinctive silhouette of a great white shark. "Contact 2 o'clock, she reported, her voice barely above a whisper. "Adult female, approximately 15 feet. The shark glided through the water. With effortless grace, its powerful body propelled by sweeps of its crescent-shaped tail. As it drew closer, Emily found herself face to face with those black, inscrutable eyes once again. Time seemed to stand still as shark and scientist regarded each other. In that moment, Emily felt a complex mix of emotions. Fear, yes, but also awe, respect, and a renewed sense of purpose. "Emily, your heart rate's elevated. Do you need us to bring you up?" James's concerned voice broke through the moment. Taking a deep breath, Emily replied, "No, I'm all right. She's beautiful." As the shark continued to circle the cage, Emily's initial fear began to give way to her scientific curiosity. She observed and recorded every detail: the shark's movement patterns, its interactions with the smaller fish in the area, the way its gills flexed as it passed. "James, are you seeing this?" Emily asked, her voice filled with excitement. "The way she's moving, it's almost like she's investigating us. There's a clear intelligence in her behavior." "We're seeing it, Em," James replied, his own excitement evident. "This is incredible data. How are you holding up?" Emily paused, taking stock of her emotions. The fear was still there, a low hum in the background, but it was overshadowed by a sense of wonder and a burning desire to understand these magnificent creatures. "I'm good, James, really good," she said, a smile in her voice. "Let's extend the dive if possible. I want to gather as much data as we can." As the dive continued, more sharks appeared. Emily observed their interactions, noting behaviors that challenged many of their previous assumptions about great white social structures. When it was finally time to ascend, Emily felt a surprising reluctance to leave. As the cage broke the surface, she was greeted by the cheers and applause of her research team. Climbing out of the cage on slightly shaky legs, Emily was immediately enveloped in a hug by Sarah. "You did it, Em. You really did it." James approached, his face beaming with pride. "That was some of the best observational data we've ever collected. How do you feel?" Emily took a moment to consider the question. "Honestly, I feel Bias alive. More alive than I've felt in months. It was terrifying and exhilarating and absolutely necessary." As the boat began its journey back to shore, Emily found herself drawn to the stern, watching the waves churn in their wake. James joined her, handing her a steaming mug of coffee. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked. Emily took a sip of coffee, organizing her swirling thoughts. "You know, when I was down there, face to face with that first shark, I had a realization." "Oh?" James prompted. Emily nodded, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "We've been approaching our research all wrong. We've been studying these animals as if they're just subjects, data points to be collected and analyzed. But they're so much more than that." She turned to face James, her eyes alight with passion. "These sharks, they're not just predators or potential threats. They're a vital part of this ecosystem, intelligent creatures with complex behaviors that we've barely begun to understand. And if we don't make the effort to truly comprehend them, to see them as the magnificent beings they are, we risk losing them forever." James listened intently, nodding slowly. "So what do you propose?" "A paradigm shift," Emily said, her voice filled with determination. "We need to approach our research not just from a scientific standpoint, but from one of genuine understanding and respect. We need to bridge the gap between human fear and comprehension." As the coastline came into view, Emily felt a renewed sense of purpose washing over her. The fear was still there, a reminder of the power and potential danger of the creatures she studied, but it was tempered now by a deep respect and an even stronger determination to uncover the secrets of these misunderstood giants of the sea. "We've got a lot of work ahead of us," she said, turning back to the bustling activity on the deck. "But I think we're on the verge of something revolutionary." James smiled, clapping a hand on her shoulder. "Lead the way, Dr. Carter. I have a feeling this is just the beginning." As they docked and the team began unloading their equipment, Emily felt a profound sense of gratitude. Her brush with death had given her a unique perspective, one that she was now using to bridge the gap between human fear and understanding. The real work was just beginning, and Dr. Emily Carter was ready for every moment of it. The early morning mist hung low over Guadalupe Island as the research vessel Carcharodon cut through the calm waters. Dr. Emily Carter stood at the bow, her eyes fixed on the horizon, where the first rays of sunlight were beginning to break through. 6 months had passed since her near-fatal encounter with a great white shark, and today marked her return to the very waters where it all happened. "Beautiful morning," James said, joining her at the railing. He handed her a steaming mug of coffee, which she accepted gratefully. "It is," Emily agreed, taking a sip. "Hard to believe we're back here." James studied her face, concern etched in his features. "You sure about this, Em? No one would think less of you if you wanted to sit this one out." Emily shook her head, a determined set to her jaw. "I need to do this, James, for the research, for the sharks, for myself." As the boat approached their designated dive spot, the deck bustled with activity. The team ran through final equipment checks, their movements precise and purposeful. New safety protocols implemented in the wake of Emily's accident were followed to the letter. Sarah, the dive master, approached Emily with a tablet in hand. "All right, Dr. Carter, let's go over the dive plan one more time." As they reviewed the procedures, Emily felt a mix of anticipation and anxiety building within her. The memory of her last dive here was still vivid. The creaking of metal, the rush of water, the terrifying moment when she found herself face to face with the great white. "Emily," Sarah's voice snapped her back to the present. "You with me?" Emily nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, sorry, just remembering." Sarah's expression softened. "Hey, it's okay to be nervous. But remember, we've got every safety measure in place. You're not alone down there. As the team prepared the dive cage, Emily went through her own pre-dive routine. She checked and double-checked her equipment, each movement deliberate and focused. As she zipped up her wetsuit, she caught sight of the scar on her leg, so permanent reminder of how close she had come to death. "All right, team," James called out, gathering everyone around. "This is a big day for all of us, but let's not forget why we're here. The data we collect today could be crucial for our understanding of great white behavior and ultimately for their conservation. Stay alert, stay safe, and let's make it count." A chorus of agreement rose from the group. Emily felt a surge of pride and affection for her team. They had stood by her through the long months of recovery and fought alongside her to keep the research program alive. As the cage was lowered into the water, Emily took a deep breath. This was it, the moment of truth. "You've got this, Em," James said, giving her shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "We're right here with you." With a nod of thanks, Emily stepped into the cage. The familiar clang of the door closing behind her sent a shiver down her spine. As the crane whirred to life and the cage began to descend, Emily closed her eyes, focusing on her breathing just as her therapist had taught her. The cool water enveloped her, a sensation that once brought comfort, but now carried an edge of trepidation. She opened her eyes, taking in the blue expanse around her. The visibility was excellent, the volcanic rocks of Guadalupe Island visible in the distance. "Comm check," Sarah's voice crackled through her earpiece. "How are you doing, Dr. Carter?" Emily took a moment to assess herself before responding. "I'm okay, no sign of our subjects yet." Minutes ticked by, each moment simultaneously stretching into eternity and passing in a blur. Emily found herself falling back into the familiar routine of observation and data collection, her scientific mind engaging despite her lingering anxiety. Suddenly, a dark shape appeared in the distance. Emily's breath caught in her throat as she recognized the distinctive silhouette of a great white shark. "Contact 3 o'clock, she reported, her voice barely above a whisper. Adult female, approximately 16 feet. The shark glided through the water with effortless grace, its powerful body propelled by sweeps of its crescent-shaped tail. As it drew closer, Emily found herself face to face with those black, inscrutable eyes once again. Time seemed to stand, still as shark and scientist regarded each other. In that moment, Emily felt a complex mix of emotions, fear, yes, but also awe, respect, and a renewed sense of purpose. "Emily, your heart rate's elevated. Do you need us to bring you up?" James's concerned voice broke through the moment. Taking a deep breath, Emily replied, "No, I'm all right. She's beautiful." As the shark continued to circle the cage, Emily's initial fear began to give way to her scientific curiosity. She observed and recorded every detail: the shark's movement patterns, its interactions with the smaller fish in the area, the way its gills flexed as it passed. "James, are you seeing this?" Emily asked, her voice filled with excitement. "The way she's moving, it's almost like she's investigating us. There's a clear intelligence in her behavior." "We're seeing it, Em," James replied, his own excitement evident. "This is incredible data. How are you holding up?" Emily paused, taking stock of her emotions. The fear was still there, a low hum in the background, but it was overshadowed by a sense of wonder and a burning desire to understand these magnificent creatures. "I'm good, James, really good," she said, a smile in her voice. "Let's extend the dive if possible. I want to gather as much data as we can." As the dive continued, more sharks appeared. Emily observed their interactions, noting behaviors that challenged many of their previous assumptions about great white social structures. "Look at that," she murmured, watching as two sharks seemed to communicate through body language. "It's like they're talking to each other." "Fascinating," James responded. "We've never documented this kind of interaction before. This could change everything we thought we knew about shark social behavior." Hours passed, though to Emily it felt like mere minutes. When Sarah finally called for the end of the dive, Emily felt a surprising reluctance to leave. As the cage broke the surface, she was greeted by the cheers and applause of her research team. Climbing out on slightly shaky legs, Emily was immediately enveloped in a hug by Sarah. "You did it, Em, you really did it." James approached, his face beaming with pride. That was some of the best observational data we've ever collected. How do you feel? Emily took a moment to consider the question. Honestly, I feel alive. More alive than I've felt in months. It was terrifying and exhilarating and absolutely necessary. As the boat began its journey back to shore, Emily found herself drawn to the stern, watching the waves churn in their wake. James joined her, handing her a steaming mug of coffee. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked. Emily took a sip of coffee, organizing her swirling thoughts. "You know, when I was down there face to face with that first shark, I had a realization." "Oh?" James prompted. Emily nodded, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "We've been approaching our research all wrong. We've been studying these animals as if they're just subjects, data points to be collected and analyzed. But they're so much more than that." She turned to face James, her eyes alight with passion. "These sharks, they're not just predators or potential threats. They're a vital part of this ecosystem, intelligent creatures with complex behaviors that we've barely begun to understand. And if we don't make the effort to truly comprehend them, to see them as the magnificent beings they are, we risk losing them forever." James listened intently, nodding slowly. "So what do you propose?" "A paradigm shift," Emily said, her voice filled with determination. "We need to approach our research not just from a scientific standpoint, but from one of genuine understanding and respect. We need to bridge the gap between human fear and comprehension." As the coastline came into view, Emily felt a renewed sense of purpose washing over her. The fear was still there, a reminder of the power and potential danger of the creatures she studied. But it was tempered now by a deep respect and an even stronger determination to uncover the secrets of these misunderstood giants of the sea. "We've got a lot of work ahead of us," she said, turning back to the bustling activity on the deck. "But I think we're on the verge of something revolutionary." James smiled, clapping a hand on her shoulder. "Lead the way, Dr. Carter. I have a feeling this is just the beginning." In the weeks that followed, Emily threw herself into her work with renewed vigor. The data collected from that first dive back proved to be even more groundbreaking than they had initially thought. Evidence of complex social structures, sophisticated hunting strategies, and even what appeared to be playful behavior among the sharks challenged long-held beliefs about these apex predators. One evening, as Emily was poring over footage in her office, there was a knock at the door. She looked up to see Dr. Elaine Winters, the head of the Marine Biology Department, enter. "Emily, do you have a moment?" Elaine asked, her expression unreadable. "Of course," Emily replied, gesturing to a chair. "What's on your mind?" Elaine sat down, her posture stiff. "I've just gotten off the phone with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. They've been reviewing our recent findings." Emily felt a flutter of anxiety in her stomach. NOAA's support was crucial for their continued funding. "And?" she prompted. A smile broke across Elaine's face. "They're impressed, Emily, very impressed. They want to expand our research program, provide additional funding for new equipment and personnel." Emily let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. That's incredible news." "It is," Elaine agreed, "but there's more. They want you to lead a series of public lectures, sharing our findings with a broader audience. They believe your personal experience, combined with our groundbreaking research, could be key to changing public perception of great whites." Emily leaned back in her chair, momentarily overwhelmed. "Public lectures? Elaine, I'm a researcher, not a public speaker." "You're also a survivor, Emily," Elaine said gently. "Your story, combined with our data, could be incredibly powerful. Think about it. You have the ability to transform the way people see these animals, to challenge the mindless killer narrative that's been perpetuated for so long." As Elaine left, Emily found herself staring out the window at the distant ocean. The idea of sharing her experience of becoming a public face for great white conservation was daunting. But as she thought about the magnificent creatures she had encountered, the intelligence and complexity she had witnessed, she knew she had to try. The following months were a whirlwind of activity. Emily divided her time between continued field research and preparing for her lecture series. She worked with James and the team to distill their complex findings into presentations that would resonate with a general audience. On the night of her first lecture, Emily stood backstage, her heart pounding. The auditorium was packed, filled. With a mix of academics, conservationists, and curious members of the public, James appeared at her side, giving her arm a reassuring squeeze. "You've got this, Em. Just tell your story. Let them see these animals through your eyes." Taking a deep breath, Emily stepped out onto the stage. The bright lights momentarily blinded her, but as her eyes adjusted, she saw the sea of faces before her, all waiting expectantly. "Good evening," she began, her voice steady despite her nerves. "My name is Dr. Emily Carter, and 6 months ago I nearly died in the jaws of a great white shark." A hush fell over the audience. Emily continued, "But I'm not here to tell you a tale of terror or to demonize these animals. I'm here to share with you the truth about great whites, a truth that's far more complex, far more fascinating, and far more important than anything you've seen in movies or sensationalized news reports." As she spoke, sharing her personal experience and the groundbreaking data they had collected, Emily could see the audience becoming more and more engaged. She showed footage of the sharks' intricate social interactions, explained the sophisticated hunting strategies they had observed, and highlighted the crucial role these apex predators play in maintaining the health of ocean ecosystems. "The great white shark isn't a mindless killing machine," she concluded, her voice passionate. "It's a highly intelligent social creature that has far more to fear from us than we do from it. As our oceans face unprecedented threats from climate change and overfishing, understanding and protecting these magnificent animals isn't just a scientific imperative, it's an ecological necessity." As she finished speaking, there was a moment of silence. Then the auditorium erupted into applause. Emily felt a wave of relief and exhilaration wash over her. She had done it. She had shared her story, her research, her passion for these misunderstood creatures. In the days and weeks that followed, Emily's lecture gained traction far beyond the scientific community. Clips went viral on social media, and requests for interviews poured in from major news outlets. She found herself thrust into the role of not just a researcher, but an advocate for great white conservation. It wasn't always easy. There were still those who clung to old fears and misconceptions, who challenged her findings and questioned her motivations. But for every skeptic, there seemed to be dozens more who were captivated by this new perspective on one of the ocean's most feared predators. 6 months after her first lecture, Emily found herself back on the research vessel, preparing for another dive. As she stood at the railing, watching the cage being lowered into the water, she felt a profound sense of purpose. James joined her, a proud smile on his face. "You've come a long way, Dr. Carter. How are you feeling?" Emily turned to him, her eyes bright with determination. "Like we're just getting started, James. We've made progress, but there's still so much to learn, so much to do." As she prepared to enter the cage, Emily took one last look at the horizon. The ocean stretched out before her, vast and full of mysteries waiting to be unraveled. Her brush with death had not diminished her passion for this work. If anything, it had intensified it. She knew that every dive, every bit of data collected, every lecture given was another step towards understanding and protecting these magnificent creatures. The fear was still there, a constant reminder of the power and unpredictability of nature. But it was overshadowed now by something greater, a deep respect for the sharks and an unwavering commitment to ensuring their future in our changing oceans. As the cage began to descend into the blue depths, Dr. Emily Carter felt a sense of coming full circle. She had faced her fears, challenged her own preconceptions, and emerged not just as a survivor, but as a voice for some of the most misunderstood creatures on the planet. The real work, she knew, was ongoing, but with each passing day, each new discovery, they were bridging the gap between human fear and understanding. And in doing so, they were not just changing the narrative around great white sharks. They were paving the way for a future where these magnificent animals could thrive, understood and protected by the very species that had once feared them most.